Order the Community Redevelopment Agency meeting. The date is January 8th and the time is 6:07 p.m. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Chair Lawson,
Here.
Vice Chair McCoy,
Here.
Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Ms. Miller Anderson?
Commissioner,
Can you hear me?
We can now. Go ahead.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Miller Anderson.
Commissioner Lanier,
Here.
Commissioner Spiritus.
Here.
Also present on the desk, Attorney Chris Smith with Pittman Law Group, Anita Jenkins, Interim CRA Executive Director, Shirley Desir, Interim CRA Clerk.
Thank you. Can we have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Spiritus?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any additions, deletions, substitutions to the agenda? Colleagues, I'd like if we could go ahead and, I know we have the discussion item, but after my agenda review, if we could possibly pull that item off of the agenda to bring this back at a later meeting. Are we okay with that? 6A. Beautification program.
That's fine with me.
Okay. Commissioners? Commissioner McCoy?
I'm just curious, what were we expecting, a presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we'll pull that. Any additions, deletions, substitutions? Motion adopt with pulling 6A?
So moved.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Spiritus,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCoy, Chair Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes 5-0.
Thank you. No items on consent. Let's go into regular agenda, 7A.
Resolution number 2025-01, approving the employment agreement with Jadel Merzius as the Executive Director of the Revere Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. The acceptance of public comment cards are now closed. Mr. Chair, we have no comment cards.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this item will be presented by our attorney, Mr. Chris Smith.
Thank you. Attorney Smith?
Well, Mr. Chair, in light of to speed this ahead, you've received the contract and you've had it. It's the contract that we've used for the last 3 executive directors. There's one change, and that's the paper you have in front of you. Any reference to the executive director working at home, there was a section 3B with employment work from his home was stricken from the contract that you've seen in your packet that you were sent out. That is the only change from the contract that you've received and reviewed.
Mr. Chair,
You're recognized, Ms. Miller Anderson.
did I hear Mr. Smith say he gave something to you all on the desk?
Yes, he handed out a paper copy with a red line. Did you email those out, Attorney Smith? Or Ms. Desir, could you email that to our colleagues, please?
Mr. Chair, I didn't, but I can.
Okay, she will email it. It was a red line on section C of the contract. Go ahead, Attorney Smith.
Commissioner, there was a section in section 3B that reference that was in the contract. The employee may work from his home residence up to 8 hours, 3 times a month. The agency's only expense shall be limited to office supplies. The employee shall be available to the agency while working from his home. The aggregate time each month shall not be subject to accumulation and must be used during the month allocated. That has been stricken from the contract. So that section to allow the executive director to work from home for 80 hours per month has been stricken from the contract. There's no other changes to the contract that you have.
So that part is, Mr. Chair,
You recognize?
I still don't have it yet. So my question is, so he's not asking to work from home at all? You said that's taken out?
Yes, ma'am. We took that out of the contract, so there's no ability to work from home for the 8 hours a month that was in the original contract. We took that out of the contract.
Okay.
Okay. Questions from the board, commissioners?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Spiritus, you recognize.
is there going to be a residency requirement within a 1 or 2 year period?
Currently in the contract, there is no residency requirement. There is in a review after 6 months. And that is something that can be discussed after the 6-month review and inserted into the contract.
Thank you.
Chair.
I have a question.
Thank you. Commissioner Spears, that's an interesting perspective that you brought up. But I know we moved away from that over at the city, and I think we amended the ordinance. But if you look at the very next section, to seemingly consider that someone has a residency requirement, I just believe that in the event of separation, if you're going to require someone to have residency within the city, it's kind of tricky in a couple of different ways. Number one, we're in a housing crisis. That's the first thing. Secondly, considering that you're only going to give or required to give a person 30 days notice upon termination seems a little bit, in my opinion, a constraint to say that we want someone in the city to be a resident. I mean, operating the CRA is not, in my opinion, like we've heard previous times, our CRA has more staff members than most. So to have the residency requirement seems a little bit unusual. I was just kind of trying to figure out what you're thinking on that and how did that come up?
Mr. Chair?
You recognize.
Okay, so I'll respond. I don't know if it should be required that the executive director live directly in the city's limits, but certainly within a certain radius. It could be 20, 30 miles, whatever, easy access. I myself ran a CRA up in New York, and I did not live in that city, but I did live within a 20-mile radius, so it was easy for me to get there at meetings and, whenever called by the city council.
Okay. All right. I appreciate your perspective. I was just curious. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Ms. Miller Anderson, you're recognized.
I still didn't get that, but I'm trying to go back and forth between what I have here. I had a question about the section, I think it's section 1. Hold on. Section 1C, I think it is. About, and this could be the part that was crossed out, I'm not sure, but it says the employee will be required to attend regular and special meetings of the Board of Commissioners or any other meetings required by the chair with reasonable advance notice. Does that section cover, like, if other board members are asking for the executive director to attend, like any meetings that we may have for our district or to attend any other HOA or homeowners or neighborhood association meetings? Is that the section that pertains to that? And if so, is that saying that just the chair would be able to ask, or is it still okay for the board members to ask?
Madam, so in this section, the part that was taken out was only in the first sentence that says, and may work from his home residence pursuant to terms on section 3B. That little part was taken out. But to answer your question, no, this only requires the executive director to attend regular meetings and special meetings that are called by the chair. Meetings that the executive director is asked to attend by different board members is not covered under this contract, and that would be that would be between the executive director and the board member in their functions. But there's no requirement under the contract that the executive director is required to attend every meeting that every council person recommends they attend.
Okay, so the employee will be required to attend regular and special meetings of the Board of Commissioners or any other meetings required by the chair. What is any other meetings required by the chair?
Well, we have the chair can call the regular meeting and the special meetings, and that part is just in there in case there's any other type of meeting, an emergency meeting. If we title something an emergency meeting called by the chair, but the chair under the bylaws has the ability to call meetings. So in called meeting by the chair, the executive director will be required to attend.
Okay, hold on.
If I may, if I may, Chair.
Ms. Melanson, are you done?
For a second, I'm just trying to flip back to come to my
Thank-
other question, but he
thank-
can go ahead in the meantime.
Thank you so much. You recognize Commissioner McCoy.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Smith, she makes a valid point. I mean, the chair doesn't have the ability to unilaterally call a meeting. We only have two meetings under our bylaws, a regular meeting and a special meeting. If you call an emergency meeting, inherently it's going to be considered an emergency meeting. So I think her questions does kind of raise another point that there's no vested ability for the chair to unilaterally call a meeting. So I think I would agree that that does create confusion and the expectation that now you're giving whoever that chairperson is the ability to force the CRA executive director to a meeting. So I think that is redundant and I think probably a little bit unnecessary.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, that can be taken out. So we would take out from, or any other meetings required by the chair with reasonable advance notice would be stricken. If that's the suggestion, the will of the board, that would be taken from the contract.
Yes, I agree.
I would be in agreement with that.
All
You recognize.
is this Miller Anderson done?
You can go ahead. I'm trying to get back to another position to get the other thing that I was looking for to ask, so you can go ahead if you want.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, if I can,
You recognize.
number one, employment term. Now, this is very interesting, and I don't know if this was actually stated in our previous agreements, but on the bottom of page 1, it speaks of the start period. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the Board of Commissioners for the agency must provide the employee with no less than 180 days written notice of its intent to renew. Now, if I'm not mistaken, shouldn't that be the other way around? We should provide the employee with no less than 180 days of our intentions not to renew the employment agreement. I mean, because seemingly, right, if we, for whatever reason, fall to 160 days and we don't have a meeting, should he assume or should that employee assume that they're no longer going to have employment with the agency? It should seem like it should be the other way around. Because I mean, what we're seemingly going to put in place is that now we're imposing another condition on the commission that we have to tell him 6 months prior to the termination of the natural termination period that we intend on renewing. I mean, I would think it's already understood because there's obviously a definite term.
Yes.
So I think the provision should be the other way around. So, and please, it's not meant to be taken directly to the prospective employee, but if we're 2 years in, you know, seemingly, I would think that if we as a board decide to go in a different direction, we would then provide the employee with the notice that we don't have an desire to renew at that point, not to renew. We don't have a desire to continue employment. So I think the way this is written, this creates a additional responsibility for the CRA at the 4.5 year mark. I'm sorry, the 3.5 year mark, to now put another resolution on the floor to say we intend on renewing. I think that's already understood unless we take action to the otherwise. Does that make sense, members?
Yeah. Mr. Chair?
You recognize.
To change that would make it almost an automatic renewal. That you're saying it's understood that we're going to renew it unless we say we're not going to. That would create an automatic renewal, almost an automatic renewal within this document. What this does is it doesn't create an automatic renewal. This is the term. Now, if you want to extend it, if the board wants to extend it, sure, you can extend it. but we didn't want to create an automatic renewal within this agreement.
So if we get to 170 days, Mr. Smith, does the CRA executive director, based on the plain language and reading of this
Yes.
agreement, assume that I'm out of a job because the board didn't take action to let me know that they're going to renew? That's seemingly what I'm understanding it to be. And if I'm not getting it correctly, then
Yes, sir. But that's why it's a term contract. So it's for a specific term. And if the director looking at the term of his agreement saying, hey, my agreement is running out, let me see if the board's going to continue, then it's up to the executive director to let the board know my contract term is going to be out. We need to renew. But in order to put it the way you're saying, would make it an automatic renewal, in which we didn't want to bind a future commission to automatically renew. We're just going to tell you if we don't renew. So it does puts an onus on the board, but it puts an onus on the board that they're not bound by an automatic renewal.
well, I mean, Mr. Smith, I understand your point, but I would love the language that we make that the responsibility of the CRA executive director, that not less than, that's 180 days. I would go a bit further to say 195 days, the CRA executive director needs to put the board on notice that his contract is due to expire, and then that can be placed on the next agenda. Because, I mean, seemingly, Mr. Smith, we're not promised to be here next week, next year, certainly not in 4.5 years from now, 4 years from now. So I just want to make sure that we don't get in a situation where, now the argument is made, well, and I actually seen this happen when we had a procurement item over at the city where somebody was seemingly reaching out to one of the respondents, and the respondent simply said, well, according to the documents, the responsibility was for me to contact one person. So when someone else calls me, then I have no duty to respond to that person because the procurement solicitation says I'm only to do this. So I would love the responsibility to be on the applicant, or at least have some onus on it, on the executive director. So it's not 180 days that we have to let him know, because I mean, things happen. What if we miss that mark? What is the CRA executive director to presume? That he's not to be renewed?
I think the onus is on him already, because his contract will be up in 2029. And the onus on him that if I want to continue past 2029, I better let the board know that my contract is coming up.
Well, Chris, I say that because seemingly we don't create the agendas. The executive director does. So if this board changes and that deadline is missed, should the CRA executive director assume that there is no continuation beyond this term? So I just want to make sure that there is a very clear responsibility of the CRA executive director, that he needs to put this in front of the board, and not us or boards to be just saying, hey, it was in the contract, so you guys didn't exercise it. So I presume that, because
Mr. Chair, can I add something to the conversation on what we've done?
I yield. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Miller Anderson.
So I can't recall how many years ago, but I remember several attorney contracts that we had on the city side. It was for the attorney to bring it to our attention. I can't really recall on the city managers, but that is who was responsible for bringing it to our attention. And that was for a number of contracts that we did. For the very same reason, I'm assuming, of what Mr. McCoy is saying, because that was the way that it was being done. It wasn't something we put in place. It had been done that way for a while for the person who has the contract to bring it before the board.
And Mr. Smith, it may be encompassed in the next following paragraph. I guess it's later in the same subsection A. Failure of the board to give the notice of intent to renew by the 180th day of the termination of this agreement shall give the employee the option to consider this agreement terminated without cause and trigger the provisions of section 4C herein. So that's the same concern that I'm saying. So if that 180-day elapsed, now the employee can exercise the provisions under 4C, that he's been terminated without cause, and can basically say, I now enjoy the severance package, because the board failed to make this, very definite decision. And we know, I mean, we have a lot of meetings sometimes, and quite frankly, we don't exactly meet our goals and what we choose to accomplish. But I think certainly there has to be a responsibility by the CRA executive director that I would like to place in there, because if that's missed, then the executive director, whoever it may be, is entitled to a severance package just because we missed the deadline. And God forbid we ever get in this situation, but I mean, these are agreements for a reason, because these things at some point probably happen or very likely will happen. So it's just something that I wanted the board to kind of consider. The other thing, if I can, Mr. Chair.
You recognize?
So I would just say we should probably make reference to the CRA or wherever, the new location is, or as designated by the bylaws, because that section refers to all notices shall go to the employee above. And the only address above is the 600 West Blue Heron. And I think we all know that that's in short period will be no longer the address for the CRA. So I would certainly encourage a caveat statement or wherever the CRA executive director's office is at the time.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair?
You recognize Commissioner Spiritus.
Okay, so I'm looking at the compensation and benefits, and I have no problem with the $200,000 as a starting salary, considering that we offered a 180 to 2 something leeway. I just don't understand why we're giving a 3% raise after 6 months when the employee is going to receive a 4% raise every single year.
Mr. Chair?
Hold on, Commissioner Spiritus. Do you have a question, or was it just the concern you wanted to?
Well, that's a concern and something I think we ought to consider amending from the contract.
Okay, Ms. Miller Anderson, you're recognized.
I agree with Mr. Spiritus. I don't think that part should be in there for the 6 months.
I concur, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair,
You recognize?
I would really encourage us to look back at that section I just brought up. I don't like, I'm sorry, you said the 6% after 6 months, right?
3%
3%.
after 6 months.
I don't recall, is there also a provision for COLA or any other benefits that's enjoyed by the general employees that's called out in this agreement?
In that paragraph, we talk about the 4% at the end of the paragraph.
But the 4% is based on merit, based on an evaluation.
Yes.
I don't think that's, I'm not okay with that. We don't give that to any employee. Now, what we do offer is COLA. And I say we offer it. Let me make sure that I'm clear on that. In the city managers and city attorneys contract, they're entitled to cost of living adjustments that's afforded to the general employees. But if for whatever budget situation we're in, I don't want to commit us to an automatic 4%. And what does it mean to have a favorable evaluation? That's pretty subjective. Like, do we vote? What is it? I mean, let's think about that. What's a favorable evaluation? Because our evaluations can be a range of scores, but how do we reach something that is plainly and objectionably something that you can consider favorable? So, in light of that, right, we have the option to terminate this agreement. So I expect that there should be an annual evaluation. However, I don't want a raise tied to it.
Mr. Chair, I'd ask for the rest of the board to comment on that.
Well, before we remove the 3% automatic increase, I think Attorney Smith, there was some discussion about the starting salary, and I think that automatic increase was based upon the employee coming in wanting a higher salary. The range that we advertised was 185 to what?
230.
230. So I believe, Attorney Smith, you negotiated those terms because the employee did want, our new employee didn't want a higher salary, but this was giving him the leverage to starting at a lower amount and increasing it after a 6-month review of the board.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would have preferred you just came in at the starting salary at the one that was requested versus this automatic increase, because it would have just kind of started us at a fair level playing field. I'm okay with taking out that 4% and just starting Mr. Jadell at the 206 that he wanted to negotiate based upon this salary. He does receive the COLA, as Commissioner McCoy did state, so I'd rather just start there at the 206 and take out that 4% annual.
Mr. Chair.
You're recognized.
Okay, based on the employee's experience, I believe $200,000 is a very fair starting salary. If he can prove to us after 6 months or a year that he's worth more and is developing the experience, then we can raise the salary. I don't think that we should be starting more than $200,000 based on the experience of the employee. And I support the employee, and I will back the employee. I think the employee will do an excellent job. And I just think that the starting salary should be 200.
So the starting at 200, taking out the 3% and taking out the 4% annual?
No, he'll get the 4% raise based on our evaluation each year.
So that was the feedback that I heard from Commissioner McCoy, that it was relative to a favorable evaluation. What does that mean? How do we quantify favorable? What does that look like to give him 4%? And then are we also in agreement, because I heard a consensus from 3 of my colleagues saying that we're going to remove the 3% from the contract. If we say leave the 4% in there, what is that based on?
Mr. Chair, why don't we just every year vote on the 4% raise?
I've seen the story. I wouldn't recommend putting that into the contract.
Well, I have no problem leaving a 4% raise in the contract for a year, because that's a fair raise for someone in that position.
And that's what I was in agreement. I would say one or the other. I mean, I'm okay with just leaving the higher salary or the 4% annual. But then also, our executive director, is he also going to receive the COLA annually? Attorney Smith?
I think that was part of HR. No, it's not. It's not in the contract to receive the annual COLA. It's not in the contract that we're signing that's before you today.
So the 4% would be in place of the annual
Yes.
COLA?
Yes.
Okay. I'm okay with that then.
Over that.
I'm okay with then leaving the 4%.
Mr. Chair,
You recognize Miller Anderson?
I'm along the same lines as Mr. Spears in terms of the base salary being 200, removing the 3% after the 6 months. And then for comparison, what are we saying? I know we're saying 4% after the year in the place of the COLA. What does the COLA average? What percentage does it typically average? Anybody know?
I think it.
I think it's 5.
5?
Mr. Chair,
Cost of living, based on inflation.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
COLA is 5%.
Thank you. Commissioner McCoy?
Wait,
Right.
hold on. So
Hold
Mr. Chair?
on. Wait a minute. Hold on 1 second. Ms. Mellinson, finish. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish.
So with taking so we're saying we're either going to do the 4% or we're going to do the COLA, not both, right? Is that what we're thinking?
Based on the question that Attorney Smith answered, he said COLA is not considered in this contract.
But we can put it in there though.
We can.
Okay, so for me, I would like to see just the 200 base salary, remove the 3% after 6 months, and then put COLA in for after the year.
In place of the 4%.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner McCoy?
Okay, so members and Ms. Desir, thank you for that, but let's just make sure that we understand what COLA is. COLA stands for Cost of Living Adjustment. Every year there isn't an adjustment to the cost of living. So let's make sure that that's clear. And Ms. Desir, I appreciate your efforts, but COLA most recently was 5%, but a couple years ago it was 3%. So, it varies based on, um, thank you, Commissioner, inflation. And I was actually going to use some more economical term like the cost consumer price index. But yeah, so if we remain stagnant as an economy, I mean, we can't sit here and say, well, nobody gets a raise, when I guess our point here is that we want to be fair and compensated, but COLA isn't guaranteed year over year. I mean, I wish cost of living adjustment would have came to the commissioners, but as you guys know, we don't share that because we just don't. And I don't think it, we need to decide whether we're going to do one or the other, but I don't think cost of living adjustment is something that we should base this on, because there may not be a cost of living adjustment.
Mr. Chair.
You recognize Ms. Anderson.
So, Mr. McCoy, if you're saying, I mean, that was kind of what I just suggested, to do one or the other, but you're saying, I understand the cost of living is not always the same each year, but my question is, one, how have we done it in the past? What were our previous last couple of contracts like? Did we have COLA in there in the place of it? Or did we have a percentage, or did we have both? Mr. Smith?
That past contracts did not have COLA, it was a percentage increases.
And that's how it's been for the last few contracts that we've had for future?
Yes, ma'am. This contract was based on the previous contracts that didn't have a COLA in there.
Okay, so I'll stick with the 4% after the year. Take the 3% out after 6 months and stick with the 200,000 base salary.
Okay. Commissioner Lanier, you had a comment?
No, I can go with either, as you suggested, the 206 and leave out the cost of living increase, or do the 200 and do 5% a year.
Okay. Additional comments from the board? I believe we had three commissioners that requested to have the 3% removed. I was okay with leaving it at the 206, or doing the 3% now without doing a 6-month assessment, and then just doing the 4% annually. But the pleasure of the board seems like we're in the direction of doing the 200, removing the 3% after 6 months, and doing 4% annual increases based upon the consensus.
Yes, sir. And
Thank you.
the last point that I would, to go back to Councilperson McCoy's point, is the notice aspect. Would you want that change to reflect Councilperson McCoy's thoughts on that?
I agree. It needs to be just reference the office of the CRA, not the address.
Okay,
Executive Director's
that can be
office.
changed. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Miller Anderson?
did we clear up whether or not we were going to have the executive director be the one to reach out to us and bring it to the agenda or our attention when it needs to be renewed at that 180 days, I think was that?
Mr. Chair, my understanding that is what the consensus of the board is, and so that language will be reworked to reflect that.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments, commissioners?
Yes, sir.
Motion. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
yeah. So we have to resolve the employment term where it says if the board fails to provide our notice, the employee has the option to consider this agreement to be terminated without cause and trigger the provisions under 4C. And if I'm following this correctly, Mr. Smith.
My understanding is we just discussed taking that part out, putting the onus on the executive director to bring that forward. It's not on the board anymore, so he couldn't consider it a termination without cause. So that would be reworked based on your
Okay, so
comments.
that whole reference to
Yeah.
section 4C would be removed, because I'm looking at 4C, it doesn't even
Yes, sir.
state without cause. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Chair. I make a motion that we adopt this contract as amended and as per Attorney Smith's amendments.
Second.
Motion been made, properly seconded. Do we have any public comment? Do we have any public comment cards?
We have no comment cards.
Thank you. Additional comments from the board? You're recognized.
Got to a place that we can agree, but, obviously subject to the agreement and acceptance by Mr. Merzius. Because these have to be agreed upon, correct?
Yes, sir. Well, what we're taking this as, this is the contract that the board is offering to him. Based on your changes, it is up to him to accept this contract or not, based on the board. This is the contract that the board will offer. And under our rules, if he rejects this contract, then we move to the second person on the list.
Okay. Well, I would also say at some point, considering that this is accepted and we move forward, that because I don't see any sort of matrix or what that evaluation criteria looks like for us to be able to have Mr. Smith, we can ask you to work with
Yes, sir.
to ensure that, I guess within 3 months' time, or I would probably say within the next 2 months, because 3 months is half of the 6-month period. So within the next 2 months, bring back some sort of performance evaluation matrix so that we can be able to measure what it means to have
Favorable
a favorable evaluation.
Thank you.
If that's fair.
Thank you. Motion been made,
Mr.
properly
Chair.
seconded. Go ahead.
I would say if it could come back a little sooner than that, if possible, maybe look to the FRA or any of those other agencies to see if they have some sort of template that we can kind of modify. But to allow Mr. Merzius to at least know what he's being graded on, for lack of a better word, just so that he has it kind of up front, so he knows how to make this move forward, as opposed to, getting it a little later. So the sooner the better, I would say.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay, additional comments? Roll call, Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Spiritus, Vice Chair McCoy, Chair Lawson. That vote passes 5-0.
Thank you. And hopefully upon your acceptance, Mr. Mercius, welcome to the organization. Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, 7B.
Resolution number 2025-02 for the Revere Beach Community Redevelopment Agency, approving an amendment to the capital project budget for the agency for fiscal year 2024-2025, attached and incorporated as Exhibit A to assist of the Villa La'Anse Townhouse project. The acceptance of public comment cards are now closed. Mr. Chair, we have two comment cards.
Thank you. Motion to adopt.
So move.
Do we have a second? Motion been made and properly seconded. We'll allow for Ms. Jenkins to give our presentation.
Thank you, Chair Lawson. Anita Jenkins, Director of Neighborhood Services. Before you is an item that we're very excited to bring to you for consideration in support of an amendment to our capital projects budget for the agency's fiscal year 2024-25. This is necessitated because of the funding needed to complete the construction financing for the Villa La'Anse project. Just to refresh your memory, phase 1 of the project is 12 for-sale townhomes in a project being co-developed by the CDC and the CRA, located at 11th Street and Avenue E. Our total construction budget is $7.5 million, and we're asking that the dollars from the phase 2 element in the capital budget be moved to phase 1 to allow us to start. I'm very happy to report that we have a financing commitment for the balance of the construction funds. We have some buyers who have executed letters of interest, and we will move very diligently to get the rest of the units committed and sold. So I'll stop and see if there are any questions.
Mr. Chair.
You recognize?
Ms. Jenkins, can you tell us how much money we're talking about?
I'm sorry, we're talking about
How much money?
$1.3 million.
For 12 townhouses?
Yes, sir. Chair,
So, Mr. Chair, can I follow up?
You recognize?
So we're putting in over $100,000 per unit subsidy?
we're putting in development dollars of an additional 1.3 million. Yes, sir.
Right, so that comes to over $100,000 per unit in the subsidy. Are there any other subsidies coming to this project from any other resources?
There are no other sources coming to the table, sir, besides the equity brought by the two developer partners and the construction loan.
Mr. Chair, follow up?
You recognize?
Okay, so I'm at a loss why the CRA hasn't looked for a money partner on this project. To develop the project, a developer who has his own financing to partner up with you. I mean, I have checked. I know that there is subsidies for people that meet the workforce housing requirements, and I know that you're figuring that it's going to be more than $218,000 a unit. I do know that number goes up to $340 per unit, depending upon the income. Those subsidies are available. We also provided $25,000, didn't we, in the budget to help subsidize first-time home buyers?
I think it's $50,000 per unit.
$50,000.
If I may,
You
Chair
recognize?
and Mr. Spiritus, I think you're mixing up some elements. There is in-buyer subsidies that will be available to potential buyers. The buyers could access whatever funding there is available at the county level. Right now, the largest amount available for subsidy, depending upon the area median income and qualifications of the buyer, will be $100,000. The city and the CRA have a down payment assistance up to $50,000. Those are in-buyer subsidies. We're looking for development dollars in order to construct the project. So this is our construction budget. And the dollars that are needed will allow us to do the site development and build the 12 homes that we would then sell to a buyer who will bring to the table first mortgage financing up to their ability to qualify, plus their dollars, and we require a minimum of 3%, plus any subsidies that they may acquire and be able to obtain.
Mr. Chair.
You recognize?
Okay, so I look at things a little bit differently, Ms. Jenkins. I look at things globally. I look at it as a taxpayer. Taxpayer doesn't care whether or not it came from the county, whether it came from the federal government, whether it came from the CRA. Taxpayer looks at someone walking into a unit getting $200,000-$300,000 subsidy, and they say, how come I didn't get that subsidy for my house? That's a pretty big subsidy in building. It's not like the money came from HUD or something to a program that already exists, that we're going to take that money regardless. That money's going to be out on the street. So I'm concerned about the amount of money that these people can be eligible for subsidies. And I'm all for affordable housing. I spent the majority of my life developing affordable housing and supporting affordable housing. But I still am at a loss why a private developer wasn't brought in who has the financing and the ability to do these projects and maybe look for other funding sources. I looked at I looked at the estimate that you gave. That's not really a true cost estimate. That was not an architectural line item estimate on the cost. So right now, we're putting the cart before the horse. We're putting money into a project without even knowing what the project is going to cost. We have not put it out to bid yet. Is that correct?
Procure, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Procurement has not released the solicitation. They're working on it. We hope to release it very soon.
And so it would be to put a project out to bid and then then you'll know how much money you need to fund the project. What happens if we're short money? What if the project comes in at $15 million?
At that point, it wouldn't be feasible, but I would contend, Mr. Spiritus, Dr. Spiritus, I'm sorry, that we've done our due diligence. We have provided information, third-party reports, and diligence items sufficient for a lender to provide the construction dollars. And let me just clarify again that the sources you're referring to, number one, the workforce housing dollars, are not available in this instance. The workforce housing program has a cap on sales prices, and you mentioned the 324,000. That is not realistic in the market in terms of a sales price, even for an existing unit. You cannot take in buyer subsidy and bring it into a project for development. We're looking to get this project constructed, to sell it, and buyers, based on their capacity, will bring their dollars to the table. There may be buyers who don't need any subsidy. So we're not projecting that the buyers would need $230,000 in subsidy. Now, the construction dollars will build the project, and I provided to you the breakdown, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Any program dollars that are left over after we build the project, we're letting you know, as we said time and again in presenting this project, that they will roll over into phase 2 of Villa La'ans. And to answer your question about the feasibility of our construction estimates, and no, we do not have construction bids from a GC. We went through a process that has been vetted, that has been accepted, and I believe our construction manager who developed the budget, Larry Zabik, who has current market knowledge, is on the phone. And if I may, Mr. Chair, if he might interject and explain how the budget was developed.
I mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No,
Thank you, Commissioner Spears.
no, he doesn't get to do that. I'm saying I mind if he does. In fact,
Oh,
I
I'm
don't think
sorry.
that answers Commissioner Spiritus's question. And I don't want to get lost in the whole narrative. So before we hear from him, Mr. Chair, can we find out from Commissioner Spiritus if he's satisfied with Mrs. Jenkins' response? Because I don't want to go too far for this, because I had a question as well.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
You recognize?
So I disagree with, you have your way of thinking on the funding. I look at it as one giant subsidy, whether we're subsidizing the construction or whether you get subsidized in the purchase price, it's one giant subsidy. I look at it that way. I'm not sure what it is a square foot, what you charge. Do you have a number per square foot what you're charging here?
I didn't bring my calculator, but I believe based on our development budget and the size of the units that it works out, some of the units will be about $200 to $225 a square foot.
200 is about the right number for a townhouse development today. In that number, you might be able to get it actually less if a GC is hungry enough. What I object to, of course, one of the things, I just think that a private developer could have done this in partnership with the CDC and the CRA. We seem to be past this point. What I think we ought to, I believe, of course, that the CRA's money should go into projects already in the CRA district to assist the people that are being impacted by other projects like the Marina project and other projects. We should be using that money primarily for infrastructure and other improvements in the neighborhood, houses that already exist in the neighborhood that people can't afford to fix. I believe that the money should go into those areas and spent there, but we seem to be past that point, I think. I do know that we have the MEOP program. We do have Oculina, which will be coming very soon, and they will have to provide a few $1 million or more. for affordable housing. We know they're not going to put that affordable housing money into their project. They're going to look for another place to put that money. They can give it to the city council, and we could obviously put it into a project like this. I would like to think that if the board does decide to fund this project right now to its full extent, that we try and get some MEOP money from a couple of projects that'll be going up in the next year or two and refund the CRA the money that we're putting, use the units that are being proposed tonight to meet those requirements and reimburse those funds.
Sure.
You recognize Commissioner McCoy.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins, understand that I'm trying to make sure I get clarity, because I know when you introduce a new speaker, we get lost off of this. I heard two things, and I wanted to go to my original thought, but what's this rollover? I've never heard of monies rolling over from phase one into phase two, which, let me ask this before you respond. Is that even called out in the development agreement for phase one?
I'd have to read through it and see it, but and let me go back to what I said originally, that's something that the board can consider for phase two. Phase two is not before you tonight, and that's a bridge that we can cross when we come to it. I just said that if there are any program dollars that are left, a decision can be made at that time as to what you want to do with them. If you want them repaid to the CRA, et cetera, put into another fund for down payment assistance. If you want to move forward with phase two, that will be a decision that you could make at that time.
Thank you. Follow up.
You recognize.
So you mentioned this hasn't been put out to procurement. This isn't a public project. This isn't a CRA project. I'm not sure what you mean by procurement. Were you referring to the CRA in the city's procurement department?
Yes, sir.
How and why would they be involved?
Just with as much transparency as possible, we've just made a decision to go that route because the CRA is involved. We want to make sure that we have local contractors, local participation, and that would be an effort to provide that opportunity. We were going down the path that we did not have to do a public solicitation, but just there was an administrative decision to be as transparent as possible in the selection of the contractor.
I'm very confused, because if I'm not mistaken, the CRA is the grantor. Why are we using the solicitation process of the city? In considering there's a staffing issue over in procurement, I'm not sure what the benefit is and why we would do that. If we're limited as the grantor with a development agreement with certain provisions to call back monies, why are we now incorporating that into our procurement process at the city? And I understand what you're saying about, trying to seek out local, but that seems like a bit much. When we give dollars under a development agreement, not with anticipations that we're going to also facilitate the procurement process. And I'd be very hesitant to support that.
Commissioner Chair
You
Lawson,
recognize.
Mr. McCoy, we would be very happy to take your advice and move the project along. If you all are so inclined to approve this tonight, the lenders are ready to close this project forthwith.
Thank you.
And we'd be able to then very quickly negotiate a construction contract. But I will make a pledge here publicly that it has always been our intent, CDC's intent, CRA's intent, to make sure that we have opportunity for local subs in this project.
Thank you. So, Ms. Jenkins, when we first did our first draft of the development agreement for Villians Phase 1, I think it was at 900,000, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was just for the first phase of construction for Phase 1.
That was an estimate. Yes, sir.
Okay. And we are where now? Aside, not considering what's before us,
$1 million. In your last budget in the year before, you approved $1 million in the capital budget for phase one.
And that development agreement is executed, but we just haven't moved on the agreement because we're still in development.
Yes, sir. We had to move through the site development, and I think it says that we'll close with the construction financing.
Okay, I get it, but here's where I'm concerned, right? I actually thought I was missing something, and please pardon me because Ms. Jenkins, as you know, we do a lot of meetings and so much stuff happens. But when I went back to the CRA's budget, which was just in August, that was put before the board,
Mhm.
the estimates then had the project at $6 million. Now we're talking about an additional $1.5 million.
Yes, sir. We have, and there is a budget that I can provide to you. We've gone through the underwriting process. We've gone through the construction cost vetting process, and that's where the numbers are.
So that's where they are. Okay. And you know, I lend with you. I trust that that's it. There's no situation that there's going to be any leftover program dollars for phase one. It's just not going to happen. I seriously doubt that. But you know, if by some means it is, because I've never seen a price go down in construction ever.
I sort of think you're right.
Okay. Well, let's pray on that one. But
Yes.
okay, all right. So here's where I'm at, and I apologize if it seems like I was interrupting where you were going, but I want to make sure that I get the very fundamental questions that I wanted to find out asked before we get into, all of this minutia. I support the project. I just am very much apprehensive. So my concern, and I think having spoken to Mr. Former executive director briefly, and I know we couldn't connect last week. I like the project, but I need more explanation as to how we move from $1.5 million. Now, obviously, if we're talking about construction costs, I want to know what the timeline is in terms of, Ms. Jenkins, where we go from here. You close on your construction deal. Our timeline looks like what? When do we get a development agreement? What are the next steps going forward to see this through? Because certainly not to anything of you, but I know we sometimes start projects. We've been building a city hall in this city for 20 years. In fact, we just went through 2 failed solicitations for a city hall. That's why, Ms. Jenkins, I said I don't want anything to go through our procurement department that doesn't have to. So I just want to make sure that we have a very sensible timeline that we can really be able to monitor and track. And when there's some deviations, we don't find out $1.5 million later. We need to be able to say, hey, well, this is where we draw the line in the sand at, so that's where my perspective is, Ms. Jenkins. And I just wanted to make sure that I established some fundamental framework as to why I was asking these questions. So if you have a response, I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair,
You recognize?
I do have a response, and I'm very happy to also report to you that our permits are waiting to be picked up. They're ready. All I need is about $98,000. So if I come to you on the city side, if you'd like to waive or reduce those, we'd be very pleased. But the permits, we've gone through the permitting process. The lender has provided a firm commitment, which means they're ready to close. And we can very quickly negotiate a construction agreement. Our attorney has done draft documents. And within 30 days, generally, once you have the agreement signed, the contractor generally asks for about 30 days to buy out the project, to meet with subs, et cetera, and negotiate their pricing. So we could be moving very quickly. Very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have relative to that.
Miss, before we go on, let's hear the public comments, and then we have Commissioner Lanier and Ms. Miller Anderson, Dr. Spears. Go ahead, Mr. Zier.
Brandy Davis Balsamo, followed by Mary Brown.
Evening, everyone. I'm Brandy Davis Balsamo. I live in the CRA. And as a taxpayer, I'm a little surprised about this. I think that the CRA is a special privilege, and it takes our tax money and harvest it. That's supposed to go into this community. I understand that there's a housing crisis. I think it's great that there are opportunities to construct new housing. I also believe it's very strong opportunity to revitalize existing housing because we have a lot of housing stock that is in desperate need of support. Our infrastructure is in desperate need of support. What concerns me is I constantly hear requests like this where we're kind of doling out this money to developers, subsidizing them. And I'm wondering, why are we doing that? Why are we putting $100,000 each into 12 each townhomes, 1.3 million for townhomes? That seems like a crazy amount of money that we're putting in. I think Commissioner Spiritus' idea makes a lot more sense. Put the money from the MEHOP into that. Stop messing with the pot of the CRA for building things, but it's not even going to potentially affect the local community because anyone could get those homes. And I think it's just 12. That's insane. That's not a lot of value for that money. We have 200 homes in our neighborhood, and we've got 3 missing seawalls that haven't been fixed. You know, if we get a surge and you wipe out half of the neighborhood, what's going to happen with your tax revenue? I think that there are just things that need to be considered in line, and I wish that there was as much interest and passion about getting started and fixing some of the things for the local people as there is that seems to be for building 12 houses. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brandy.
Mary Brown?
Revere Graham, Revere Beach, to the chair and to the board, and to the representatives that are virtual. And I say again, welcome, Mr. Murdis. Murdis? Is that right? Little bit.
Ladies, oh,
Okay.
I mean,
Welcome aboard. How you like us so far? Okay. This project here, if you do move this here, you as the designated governing board, you have the green lights to go in this project here and put some green lights or some red lights where you feel as if they're where they should be. Now, this project will also pick up some local contractors and some local participation. And I'm a firm believer too that if we do build it, they will come and someone will perhaps take an investment part within it because it will all be on our main corridors here. And it would pose some representation so that others, if we build it, others can come into the city here and also make some type of an investment themselves to buy in to the project. But the bottom line of it is, if you agree or disagree in it, you controls it. You controls it. And if it's any way that you find or come to realize that it is some sticklers in there, I'm using that term, sticklers. Some sticklers there, you can always green light it. So that's where I am with this project. Picking it up, she also made mention about it has already gone through the permitting process. So obviously the things are moving within this, but the green light relies on you as a governing board. So if you decide to take this chance here, I've heard what another resident said about her area here. All of this here area here has to be redone. It's just not one sector of this CRA district. It's the whole incorporation of this CRA district. So you all need to take that into consideration as well too. How do we build here to accommodate everybody and everything and get us moving and put some red lights in this district here? So those are my comments. Thank you. Happy New Year again to you.
Commissioner Lemire?
Yes, I just wanted to go back to some of the remarks that Dr. Spirit has made in regards to subsidy. I'm not sure if I heard him correctly when he talked about if someone walks in the door with, 150,000 worth of subsidy, that somebody else could say, why didn't I get that? And I thought that Ms. Jenkins made it clear in terms of, either state money or county money, anybody can get that subsidy. I don't know if he was talking about the subsidy in terms of the development or the subsidy in terms of the actual individual coming into the unit. Because what happens is that if you are looking at a project and you want to ensure that the project is sold, those type of subsidies are available to anyone. And I hope you're not saying that, we should not allow that. I'm not sure what I heard.
Ms. Lemire, you're breaking up.
Oh, no, I was just asking Dr. Spiritus to follow up on that because I wasn't sure of what he was saying when he talked about subsidy.
Okay,
Okay,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair.
Dr. Spiritus?
Okay, what I was referring to was the workforce housing subsidy program. It's something that I think that the CDC and the CRA ought to look into. If you brought in a private partner, they would get density credits, substantial density credits that are transferable to other projects, and that would make the project much more affordable. And the subsidies that I was talking about, or there's approximately 51,000, depends on your income, available from the county bond for subsidies in workforce housing. And this is going to be pretty much a workforce housing, 60 to 140% AMI is workforce housing. So I was referring to that subsidy in particular, but then we also have our own subsidy that we made available. So someone could actually walk in here and we are subsidized, supposed to be affordable housing, so they should be able to walk in here and afford it without getting subsidies, which in reality they're going to get anyway, more than likely. Hopefully they'll get some of the subsidies that we made available for this program. So I'm just looking at the total subsidy for this particular project. If you went and bought a house, you'd get a $50,000 subsidy. But the odds are it would not be in an affordable housing project because the house should already be affordable when you go to buy that house. So it's kind of double dipping, and the community shouldn't be doing that. We should either provide affordable housing that's affordable and they don't need the subsidies, or just give subsidies to housing that already exists. We shouldn't be doing both at the same time. So that's what I was referring to. But I do urge you, Ms. Jenkins and the CRA's executive director, hopefully new executive director, we'll look into the workforce housing transfer development rights, the credits that they give on projects like this to private developers, because that will be an easy way to get affordable housing because they'll get those additional units in their project. It's very similar to our MEOP program.
Thank you. And Ms. Lanier, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered my question because I was just trying to I'm trying to figure out, was he talking about an individual subsidy versus a development subsidy? So you made that clear.
Okay, so my concern with that, Dr. Spiritus, is the developer and the subsidy for those major developers. Those developers do get the credit with the MEHOP, and they can build these housing and they can come in and benefit. But I think the contribution for the 1.3 helps with the local minority and women developers with providing that subsidy to allow for them to come in. We have a little bit more leverage with giving the construction company. These major developers, they can build these with their eyes closed and they'll get that done quickly. But giving the opportunity to some of these small businesses and some of these small vendors who they are only using 5 to 10% of the local market, would transform our community when it comes to the construction companies that are here in our community. So I think that subsidy for the construction costs helps with the small business development. It helps with providing an opportunity and a subsidy to develop our workforce. And then also the separate subsidies that we're getting from the county and from the city is going to be going back into the budget, because those subsidies that's coming from the county is going to come back towards the purchase price. We're not doing any tax abatements for this project at all, are we? They're going to be paying taxes based on the full market value?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then moving forward, once the CRA does sunset, those dollars will be going back into the city. So I think that 1.3 commitment wasn't just to try to get it done fast and quick. It was to really spur some growth and development with the local development community, with some of these small developers that have the opportunity. Because when you have these major developers who are just going to use the additional density of the 4 to 5 stories through the MEHOP to build a project like this, it doesn't benefit them as much as it would a small developer like a contractor, local contractor.
Mr. Chair?
You recognize?
Okay, well, just to go a step further, this program is for small contractors as well. Small contractors benefit from these credits. It gives them the ability to build a second project, a third project, gives them the ability to become a large contractor and develop that track record. So that is a good program, like the MEOP program. It's a credit program for transferring development rights. So it's not just for large developers, it's for small developers as well. They can benefit from it as well. So I just think we should look into it in the future. And I don't know where we stand with this project right now. We don't even know who the contractor is going to be yet. We don't know what the price is going to be yet, whether it's even going to be within that $7 million range. It might come in at $10 million. We may not have a project. We don't know. I think there should be a plan B. I think the CRA should be talking to private developers, and they can even be small private developers right now to go partners on the project, and just in case the project comes in for more than what they're expecting.
I definitely agree with the plan B and the options for that. I want us to be intentional with these dollars that we're spending, though. If we're going to be budgeting this 1.3 going into local minority and women businesses to help with building this benefit and pouring into those businesses for these first-time home buyers, but also having the plan B, because if it comes back in where these developers can't do it for less than $10 million, of course, we won't have a project as Dr. Spiritus did state. So I trust that the developers can get it done with the additional subsidy for construction costs. And then I know you're already working on the first-time home buyer program because you've been doing back-to-back classes. So we have a surplus of people ready to move into these homes. We just have to get them built. And then I know development services was another discussion that we've had over the last year that's kind of delayed this, and those are some of the concerns of my colleagues. But I know with development services upstaffing some of their individuals from this CRA, that will hopefully help with moving those permits a little quicker. So I didn't have any additional concerns. I'm supportive of it, and I would like to move forward.
Chair,
Dr. Spiritus, you recognize?
Yeah, one more question. Ms. Jenkins, how much did we pay for the land on this project?
I believe that the total acquisition cost between the CDC and the CRA was close to $500,000 over a number of years. So land was acquired by both
And
entities.
parcels, yes.
And let me clarify in case there's another question. There's a larger project, so all of the parcels have been assembled between the two entities. So total so far about $500,000.
So then we'll have 1.8 million put into this project if we approve this resolution tonight.
No, the CRA did not pay all of those dollars. I believe one of the properties was swapped with another property owner, and one small piece was donated. So there are a variety of methods.
But did we pay $500,000 in cash or no?
Not the CRA, not in total.
Did the CDC
And
pay?
Mr. Spiritus, I can get back to you. I don't want to talk off the cuff because there were many parcels between Villa Lawns Phase 1 and Phase 2, and I'd have to look it up and get back to you.
Thank you.
Sure. So, Ms. Jenkins, I can understand his question regarding the acquisition of the property, but certainly you can speak to what the CRA's total cash contribution to this project is going to be.
Yes, sir. There is $1 million from phase one, and if you approve tonight, it will be the other 1.3 million. So it's 2.3 million.
Almost 3 million.
So here's what what was the 1.3 set aside for in the budget?
For a million for phase two and 300,000 is coming from the unallocated line item in the capital budget for affordable and workforce housing projects. So it's a combination.
Okay, so what do we do? This is interesting. Um, so let's talk about this, Ms. Jenkins. And I know you kind of responded, but the procurement, have we agreed that the city procurement department is not to do this? Because I don't want to create additional bureaucracy. And if you recall, Ms. Jenkins, there are some very strict requirements, and I'm not saying that we should not be transparent in it. But for Christ's sakes, we've been trying to do security guard services for a year and a half, probably 2 years, a year for insurance, probably just about 2 years for City Hall. I just can't see that I want to see this project get held up like that. I'm already holding my nose and voting, right? I just can't see that I want to move that way. So I want to know what this looks like. When can we expect a development agreement?
You have a development agreement, Mr. Chair, if I may.
You recognize?
I think you're referring to a firm price or fixed price general contractors agreement. We could, if this is approved, we would negotiate something and have that within 30 days, and we can inform you that we are ready to move ahead. And that would coincide with closing on all of the construction financing and pulling the permits.
Right. In that closing, do you expect the money to be conveyed to whatever holding? Is it a SP, a special purpose entity that's going to be
The money, we would do it like we do other
draws?
construction contracts. The lender would set up a construction account, and there would be draws.
So, okay. When will the money be dispersed from the CRA?
When draws are presented to the CRA. Generally, the first draws, I will tell you, would be for site development, and it will come in pieces. So depending upon the relative participation with the other construction lender, the draws will be presented. They'll go to CRA executive director, et cetera, and then dollars will be transferred. We're not asking and don't expect that all that money will be transferred into some account at this time. You'll see the project moving along as draws are coming in.
Right, but I expect that to come back each time for board approval, correct?
For a draw?
Yes.
We'll never get the construction finished.
Well, here's the thing. But Ms. Jenkins, hold on one second. You're asking us for a budget amendment. This resolution only authorizes us to reallocate the monies. It doesn't authorize us to expend the monies.
The development agreement that's already executed does.
Well, then so help me understand this. So if we're adding an additional $1.3 million to this development agreement, how do we not see the development agreement again?
Mr. Smith?
Because fundamentally, the whole entire development agreement changes because now we're additional $1.3 million into this project. So you're saying that we wouldn't be going back to amend the initial agreement? And let me tell you why. I see this gentleman chuckling here, but understand this. Do you know why we have, and I'm sure you do, but let's remind the members why we have approval of the invoices on our agendas. because there was $1 million check sent from the CRA out to a developer without any sort of board approval, without any sort of oversight whatsoever. So my concern is this: I don't want to get down the line, and even if we delegate this to our CRA executive director, I don't want to get down the line and we find out at some point we've already conveyed all of this money. This is exactly what happened to Brook subdivision. Like, there are these kind of things happen where projects go belly up, and that's certainly not going to happen here when we're going to just blanket make a budget amendment to our capital plan and we never see this item again. And then, God forbid, if something happens, it's like, well, where was the oversight?
What I will, if I recall from the development agreement, it already requires that there's regular reporting, not only to the executive director, but also to the board. I believe it calls for monthly reports, etc. We can bring back the amended development agreement for the contribution amount. You have a meeting on the 22nd, I believe. If it's still on, then we could put that on the agenda for the amount. There's already a process for review and oversight of the project that's included in the development agreement, that's included in your packet.
Yeah, well, I'm leaning with Mrs. Spiritus, right? We don't even have a GMP, right? And clearly, if the prices are going and have the ability to change, I don't want to get a year and a half down the line and we find out we're still short monies or something comes up. Without a GMP or without a hard estimate, essentially we're being asked to set aside $1.3 million into a bank account that we don't control. And then a developer who's not the city, who's not the CRA, now gets to actually go to the finance company and be able to pull those draws with no oversight whatsoever from the board. Certainly, this is the same exact situation, and the very reason why we have approvals on every single agenda from the CRA, and it's been that way for at least the last 10, 12 years that we've had this process in place.
Mr. Chair,
Directors.
there would be no construction movement without a guaranteed maximum price and a signed agreement by a contractor, general contractor, that has been vetted and approved by the lender, et cetera, the larger lender. The construction would not start. So we would have a guaranteed maximum price in hand before we start. So we wouldn't be down the line 18 months later and the price would change.
Well, Ms. Jenkins, hold on. We're 7 months down the line and the price has changed $1.5 million. So, I mean, you can't guarantee what's going to happen in 3 months, Ms. Jenkins. That's the very reason why I'm asking these questions now. So, I mean, I have to really discount what you're saying because you wouldn't be here asking us for money if the price didn't change.
Mr. Chair,
Directors.
Mr. McCoy, the price that you were given, the cost that you were given, not the price, but the cost you were given in the budget is an estimate. We now have third-party reports. We have current information. We have professional advice on where pricing is at this point. And I want to stress that because the commitment is fresh. It's not a 6-month-old commitment. And this is something that we have in hand now that we did not have 6 months ago.
And nothing intended, but this seems just like something we've seen in the last couple of years with the sunset. You know, the CRA in West Palm Beach went in thinking it was one thing and it was $14 million later, but once they were already in, they were committed. Now, this makes it even a little bit more difficult and challenging because we don't own the project. We don't own the property. So, you know, those are my concerns, Ms. Jenkins. I just want to make sure that there is some oversight and we have some ability to call back those dollars because I don't want to get down the line and we have nothing to show because clearly we've been here 6 years now and we've been having a whole lot of discussions about building. I mean, you know what? Oh, gosh, Notre Dame burnt down and that place was built back in a matter of a year and a half or 2 years, and we can't even we can't even turn dirt on some townhomes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Ms. Jenkins, is this project going to go out to bid?
We will, based on the conversation and direction from the board, we would not release an RFP, but we would solicit bids from
Jenkins,
various
I
contractors.
think that was just the sentiments of one colleague, so I want to get a consensus as to
Okay. Yes, sir.
as to what's the direction, because I know my colleague, and I would be in agreement, but I want to make sure that all my board opines on that.
Yes, sir.
Chair,
You're recognized.
I need to ask, if we do not go through that process, will it be quicker?
What?
I'm sorry, repeat that, Commissioner?
Will it be quicker if we forego the process of procurement?
Jenkins.
Yes.
Then I agree with that.
Additional comments from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Miller Anderson and then Dr. Spraders.
So I didn't quite hear at the beginning. What, we're agreeing on what? For her to not go through procurement? Can you hear me?
Yes, I think the sentiments were from a couple of the colleagues, the process of the procurement would be a lengthier process
Mr. Chair.
and the staffing limitations.
And so what is the process if we don't go through procurement?
Ms.
If she
Jenkins,
does?
the process that you had presented previously without the procurement process.
Yes, sir. We have our package together. We would, I would get with our executive director, our new executive director, and brief him and get his input. But we do have a list of contractors that work in affordable and workforce housing, and we would ask them to provide bids on the project.
Sure.
Chair,
Hold on one second.
Chair.
Hold on one second. Commissioner Miller Anderson, satisfy your answer?
Yeah, but I would like to see it go through procurement. I'm not sure about the oversight, not necessarily oversight, but just the transparency going that way.
Okay. Commissioner McCoy, you had a comment?
Yes, Chair. Ms. Jenkins, thank you for your efforts here, but I think we have to be clear, and maybe this is not. We are simply the grantor. We have no subject matter jurisdiction to send this through procurement. And I just shared that with Mr. Smith, and I hope he can kind of add some insight on it. All we're doing is offering up the money. What you're essentially asking is to turn this into a CRA project, which is not that, because we don't control the project. It's not our project. We're simply granting the dollars to kickstart our affordable housing efforts. So, Mr. Smith, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, I would agree. We'll have Ms. Jenkins comment on that aspect. The project is a CDC project or CRA project?
A CDC is the developer.
So you would be correct, councilperson, that this is not a CRA project, so it wouldn't go through the city's procurement process. That's a private entity.
Chair.
That was Commissioner Lanier.
Yeah, let me ask Ms. Jenkins, has she done this process before with any other projects that she's been on?
We've done it before.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Spraders.
Just because we've done it before doesn't mean that it was done right. In transparency, you put things out for either an RFP or a bidding procedure, and especially when you're using government money, you're using the taxpayers' dollars. And the fair way to do it is to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate and submit a proposal. My question right now is to our counselor. Can you tell me what would happen? We give this money, we've transferred this money, and they don't do the project. Do we get the money back? And how will we get the money back?
I'd have to look at the development agreement to see what clawback provisions are in the development agreement. the agreement.
I've seen many new projects, Mr. Chair, it's okay to,
Mhm.
Yeah, but
I've seen many projects and good intent on projects where they end up being foreclosed on by the bank because the economy either changes or something happens. Uh, Where would we stand in getting our money back? We would be in like a third position, I guess, not even a second position.
Fair.
I'd have to look at the exact agreement and get you the wording from that. I don't have the agreement with me right now, sir.
Well, that's very concerning,
Yes.
that we might give money that we could not recapture if something bad were to happen. Not to say that something will happen, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to watch this money.
Sir, Commissioner McCoy?
I was just gonna say, this is a non-recourse grant. We have none whatsoever.
Well, then I think it's a bad grant.
Well,
Mr.
I
Chair.
mean, to the extent that, and that's, so Commissioner, that's exactly why I wanted more oversight and not just seemingly approve a budget amendment and then that just, we never see or hear of it again. You know, and I can appreciate that there's monitoring from the financial institution side, but who protects our interests to see that? And Ms. Jenkins, as much as I would say I can appreciate you being the housing czar and the good work that you do, but you're wearing two roles here, both in the CRA and the CDC. But for all intents and purposes, I would love to have someone that has oversight or our agent, our owner's rep that ensures that, you know, our 2.3, what is it? 1 point, yeah, $2.3 million is ensured that they are meeting these benchmarks, you know, in terms of, that's why I'm asking this question, because this seems just like deja vu. And for members that were around or can recall, previously this happened with the Ocean Mall development many years ago, where monies went out the door without any oversight whatsoever. And then what happened to the developer of the Ocean Mall? They went belly up and got bankrupt and we got stuck. So, I mean, but let's not confuse the oversight component that we're charged with as commissioners to be fiduciary agents with us now saying that the procurement process needs to go to the city.
Oh, no, I didn't, Mr.
Well,
Chair.
I know it wasn't you, but it's been said by Ms. Jenkins, and I think she wants to promote that, but I just don't think we have the capacity in our procurement department. They have a staffing shortage, and quite frankly, this is not in their wheelhouse. And in fact, we can't even force them to do this.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on. Commissioner McCoy, you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
No,
Commissioner.
I wasn't suggesting that we put it through the city's procurement procedure. This is not rocket science. This is a small development project. We should be able in-house to prepare a simple RFP or a bid document. This is not a difficult task to do. With respect to your procurement, you know, we can't be, you know, not in charge on one side and in charge on the other side. Either we're going to control this money or put conditions to getting this money, and oversight could be part of the condition to get the money. It shouldn't just be non-recourse, here's the money, good luck. I mean, that's not a professional way to deal with this money and to protect the taxpayers' dollars.
Mr. Ch-
Hold on one second.
So I just think that I believe that in-house we should be able to put this out for bid or an RFP, and we should be able to do it in a pretty short period. It's my understanding the plans and specifications were just completed recently.
Sir, they've been complete for some time. We've gone through the entire plan approval process, and you all saw that and approved it on the city side and the CRA side, and we've used them to go through the permit process and through the loan approval process. And we negotiated the development agreement that included protection for the CRA and clawback, et cetera, and payment and for non-performance or in case of default. So, and the CRA was represented by an attorney and the CDC was represented by an outside attorney so that the interests were negotiated. And we had several meetings that we came before the CRA board. So that has been done.
Sure.
You're recognized.
So when were these plans and specifications completed? Can you give me a date or around when, how long ago they were done?
Complete construction plans, I think, were probably completed about a year ago. I could be wrong. Our architect is not here, but more than a year ago, because we've been in the permit process for some months. But and I'm trying to remember when we gave an update on this particular project.
Mr. Chair.
You're recognized.
So is there a reason we didn't put this out to bid a year ago or put out an RFP a year ago? We would have had plenty of time to know exactly what the cost of this project. We might have saved some money. Might have been able to jumpstart this project before inflation hit, because you know that costs have gone up almost 200% on development costs in just the last 2-3 years.
We wanted to make sure that we got through the site plan approval process, et cetera, that everything was approved, recorded, and that we were able to get through all of that, because it takes some time. And if we had done that a year ago, it's a guarantee that prices would have changed within the year.
When was the zoning approval done? P&Z.
Forgive me, Mrs. Burtis, I don't have the date right before me, but it would have been, it went to P&Z, it came to the CRA for a finding of consistency, and it went to the city council for approval of the site plan. So it was a process. It was a process.
I understand the process. I still think that it probably should have gone out to bid and we could have maybe jump-started. I mean, we are the city. We are the CRA. We are the city. I think we probably could have cut a lot of red tape and jump-started this project a lot sooner than waiting over a year. Unfortunately, we had the same problem with the water plant.
Chair, so Mrs. Commissioner Spears, understand, you keep referring to why shouldn't we, this was a grant.
I get it.
Okay, thank you, because, it's very interesting that we've gotten drawn into this to the point where it seems like we're the developer and this is our project, but, I've shared this, members, that I have the largest district, and that means that there is more than almost nearly half of the residents of this city reside in District 1, and there is not a shortage of people that are displaced that contact us. And very interesting, I love to see what Palm Beach County did with the La Quinta Inn and trying to negotiate that for a homeless shelter. I would love to see that we can do that on Blue Heron Boulevard at the Travel Lodge, but the truth is we have a housing crisis, right? And this board, I think everybody on this board, with the exception of me, agreed to do a modification of our millage rate to adjust the CRA's capital budget for monies to go into affordable housing. So is that correct, Ms. Jenkins? I think the board did adopt that once the millage rate did increase to
Yes, sir.
set aside monies for workforce housing. So, I'm not traditionally in support of raising taxes, but, this was the very intent of why we did it. So, that's why I really have to support it. I mean, this is not the best scenario. I wish we could have got ahead of this a year and a half, 2 years ago, when we only had $900,000 committed and we could have seen the project through. So here we are, but that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments from the board? Madam Clerk, before we take the roll call, there was a few changes. Ms. Jenkins, do you understand the direction of the board?
If I may reiterate, Mr.
For the
Chair,
record, thank
that we are to use an expedited process with the CDC to move ahead in identifying and negotiating an agreement with a general contractor. You'd like to see the amended development agreement for the additional dollars come back before you at the 22nd meeting for that amount. So we'll make that amendment. And I believe that's it, that we will, according to the development agreement, provide the regular reports, which are at least monthly, to the board on the progress of the project. And there are some milestones in terms of when we have to start the project, start construction, and complete the project.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Chair,
Commissioner Lanier, you're recognized.
Sorry, just also add to have Ms. Jenkins to give us a timeline.
I can bring that back
Thank you.
in writing.
She said she'll bring it back in writing. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Spiritus,
I'm just going to clarify, I did not like this whole process. I think it was done poorly. I hope that our new executive director will come up with a new way of doing projects like this. We're just acting as a bank. I will vote yes because the horse is basically out of the barn and we've put in a lot of time, money, and effort at this point. But in the future, I will not vote for projects that are done in this manner.
Vice Chair McCoy,
Yes.
Chair Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes 5-0.
Thank you. And
Thank you all.
Thank you. And colleagues, all we have remaining commissioner comments, general public comment. I do apologize. I have to leave, but we can go through without any additional business of the board. Vice Chair.
Thank you. That's good. I don't need it. Ms. Jenkins, before you go and before we go into public comment, so Ms. Jenkins, Commissioner Lanier stated monthly reports. I just hope that that doesn't mean we wait until we get to a CRA meeting to be updated. You know, so if there's some progress that happens in the interim between meetings, certainly I would like to have that report provided to us. And if you guys could provide or be prepared to provide a summary of that at the next regular meeting.
Yes, sir.
Because, you know, sometimes we are a month, sometimes a little bit less. So,
Most assuredly.
okay. Madam Clerk,
Mr. McCoy,
you recognize.
Mr. Lawson left. Are we bound by the same rules as the county? I mean, I'm county, as the city in terms of present council people for a quorum?
Well, Mr. Smith, did you hear the question?
Yeah, you don't have a quorum right now, so you cannot conduct any business. You cannot do any votes or conduct any business.
I see.
So we are still permitted to hold public comments, which were
Yes.
already slated. And my understanding, Ms. Jenkins, don't go too far because we'll be coming back to you for executive director comments since you're still executive director until the agreement is ratified. So if you want to hang tight there, hopefully we won't be long. Ms. Desir, do we have any general public comments?
Mr. Chair,
You recognize.
we have one comment card. Mary Brown.
Ms. Mayor Brand, Riviera Beach, I told you you could green light or red light. You can put whatever sticklers that you need to do in order to move the project forward. I'm gonna do some runs tonight. Rebuild, revive, renew our city, and that is exactly what we're doing. General public, I was gonna let you know that we are still on the move with our workshops. On last night, January the 7th, informing our general public with our utility district meetings and how we are proceeding to move forward. On Thursday, January the 9th, we will have another meeting over here at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. On Monday, January the 13th, at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. at the marina. And to you general public, on Wednesday, January the 15th, at 5:30 p.m., we will do a resolution to adopt the price rates increase that we will need in order to proceed, in order to build up and build out what we need to do in this city here. That will require the infrastructure for our utility district, for the future increases to the district water, sewage, tapping, master meters, sprinkler meters, fire service, protection, and service availability rates, fees, and charges. So that is on the 15th. Also, on this January the 18th is the MLK parade. It will start at 10 o'clock a.m. And the City of Riviera Beach, District 4, Councilperson Glenn Spiritus, invite you to a municipal beach improvement community meeting. It will be held on January the 27th here at the marina from 6 o'clock p.m. And that is on a Monday. And he's asking for the residents and all concerned to come out so that we can see how we can progress here at this marina here. And in conjunction with the veterans, in support for our veterans on January the 31st, our library is also conducting a workshop with the Legal Aid Society to assist our veterans that are much, much needed. And we always thank them for their service. And Edith Bush for the proclamation for her outstanding service that she has rendered for the centuries of years that was given to her on Tuesday down at the county. I also was there at the county for the swearing in of the attorney, Alexis Cox. And she charged the community that we will rise to that occasion to serve our community. So we are on the move, and I thank Suzanne and you, UD, for moving us in the direction to build our water plant. Thank you.
Mr. DeZero. Thank you. Comments from our interim executive director, Ms. Anita Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, first and last time. The only comment that I have is we would like to thank the board for your support of the recent RFP training. We had approximately 20 small business owners and contractors to graduate in late December, and the program was very well received, and we're honoring our commitment to try to assist our small contractors, subcontractors in our area, and business owners. And additionally, the staff would like to thank Mr. Scott Evans for his service and his work at the CRA for a number of years. We're going to miss him, but we wish him well in his new endeavor. And the staff would like to wholeheartedly welcome our new executive director, Mr. Jadel Mercius, and we look forward to him taking the helm at the CRA. And that's the end of my public comments. Thank you.
That was your executive director comment, so you weren't really a member of the public, Ms. Jenkins, but I understand. I came prepared to ask where we are, and I know this is probably a little bit more than what you came prepared to answer, so I will leave it, but I wanted to kind of really get to speak to that transition document that Mr. Scott Evans left, and I think we probably will have time to go through that a little bit more detail, Ms. Jenkins, and I know don't seem like you have that binder with you, but we can talk about that later, especially with some of the projects. And I think that'll be ripe for Mr. Merzius, considering he has I think it was a 90-day plan, and then the projects that were currently in transition upon Mr. Scott Evans' exit. So I think we will have some time. And if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Smith, we're set to be here on the 22nd. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Statements by General Counsel.
Mr. Chair.
Members of the commission. You recognize Mr. Spears, Commissioner.
Okay, I just want to mention that I met with Palm Beach County SCORE group today. I think that the CRA should contact them and work with them in helping the local small businesses. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller Anderson.
She's left already.
Commissioner Lanier.
I just wanted to thank Scott Evans and Ms. Jenkins for their tireless work for the CRA and to welcome the new executive director. Tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at the Brooks Center, we'll hold our monthly education committee meetings, and the discussion will center around the allocated budget for the education system in Riviera Beach at that meeting tomorrow, 6 p.m. at the Brooks Center.
Thank you. I have no comments other than I believe members, if we're correct, don't we have a meeting here there's a community meeting tomorrow here, right? Regarding the water utility. Okay, so is that 6 o'clock? Okay, so there's a community meeting tomorrow here at the Riviera Beach Marina Event Center regarding the utility water plant and the rate water increases, correct, Mr. Commissioner Spears? Tomorrow here at 6 o'clock. All right. I have nothing else. Nothing else for the good of order. We stand adjourned.